Okay, hello and welcome to our third virtual coffee special edition, the interview series. Please welcome our interviewer, Gant Laborde. He is a co-owner and chief innovation officer at Infinite Red. He's also a published author, an adjunct professor, a worldwide public speaker, and apparently a mad scientist in training. And welcome our interviewee, Kirk Shillingford, a software manager at Financial Data Systems Limited. He's been doing software professionally for the last 6 years, and he currently uses the .NET stack. So thank you for being here. I'm just going to go over a little bit of how this works. Our interviewers each have types, and so the previous two interviewers, we had the friend and we've had the jerk, and Gant today is going to be playing a part as well. So this is not Gant you're seeing, this is Gant as a type of interviewer, so just keep that in mind. We'll reveal what type he is after the interview. So to set this up a little bit more, Gant has received Kirk's resume, he has also received a job description, and we're assuming that this would be a first interview in a series of interviews. This interview will last between 20 and 30 minutes, and he'll interview Kirk, and after the interview, he'll break character. He'll provide feedback to Kirk, give Kirk an opportunity to ask his questions, and then at that point, we'll be looking for your questions in the chat, so you can ask anything about this interview, or if you have general questions about the interview that you would like to know the answers to. We've got some great people who can answer that for us today. A special thank you to Gant for taking the time to do this, and also Gant was the one that came up with this idea, so extra special thanks for helping us get this off the ground and to provide this experience for everyone else. I appreciate that. And then a special thank you to Kirk, who has stepped in to be our interviewee today. I am going to turn off my video now, and then we will take the next 20 to 30 minutes to watch you. Thanks.
All right. Okay, here we go. All right. Hey, Mr. Shillingford, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're just going to go ahead and check out. I assume that you got our job posting. You saw everything that we need to see. So I'm just going to kind of go over your resume with you, ask a few technical questions, and dig into, whether or not you'll be a good fit for our company or not.
All right,
sound good?
Let's get started.
Okay, all right. So I see here you have BE in environmental engineering.
That is true.
Can you explain environmental engineering to me?
Sure. In a nutshell, it's really hard to do that because the field is pretty wide ranging. My particular specialty was in energy systems, and basically while trying to get my environmental engineering degree, I realized that I really liked the software aspect of it. Nowadays, more and more traditional engineers have to learn how to program and write basic scripts, but I was getting really frustrated with how they wrote the scripts. Academia tends to not follow sort of the things that we consider good practice in professional software development. They don't like doing TDD, they don't like doing documentation, and I started getting more and more into that, and then I realized, I was pretty content to focus solely on the software development side of things, so I had a choice. Okay, if I try and switch majors, that's going to take way more time, it's going to cost way more money, et cetera, or let's keep going to this degree. It's still a valuable degree, but in the meantime, let us try and do as much software as we can, work that into our projects, and kind of, do that training on our own. And that's how I got to be here.
Okay. And so you started, so you got the degree in 2016, and then how many years would you say you've been programming professionally?
From the time that I finished the degree, although while I was getting the degree, I did have work that did involve software. That was happening since my sophomore year, basically. So all internships, all paid internships, and there was always either fully software development or a software development component of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that explained. You have quite a few programming languages listed here. One of the things you have listed is you have SQL under programming languages. Would you call SQL a programming language?
Oh, I mean, I definitely would.
Mm.
I know some people consider it to be, maybe just scripting or sort of. I don't think it's fair to separate sort of general purpose languages from more niche languages like SQL, and I guess MATLAB might fall into that. At the end of the day, it's instructions to a machine to achieve some sort of desired result. The same principles apply, TDD still applies, good design still applies, debugging still applies. So yeah, it's up there.
Well, then in that same sense, you have also under here Git under programming languages. Is that because that's your definition of programming languages that you would say Git is fitting under that?
Yeah, and I suppose because Git is relevant enough in the software development sphere that it feels like something that you should note. If not Git, then at least some familiarity with version control software. So I felt like it was relevant to put there.
Okay. Yeah. And so you have that under that category. What I see here that you have some .NET based finance software kind of information here. What's your familiarity with like finances and finance-based stuff that you were working with? Did you have any of the business logic that you were writing for?
Actually, my personal experience with finance is pretty limited. When I came into the project, I had not worked in finance before. So
Gotcha.
One of the things I had to do, I guess, when I came in was I had to leverage the fact that, okay, my job as a developer, is to take the information you give me and translate that into a usable software product. In my case, there was no product manager, so I had to sort of do both of those roles. So I'm both like dealing with the client directly, taking that knowledge, doing the research, turning that domain knowledge into and then implementing it at the same time, which was challenging, but not unachievable. And I think I did a pretty good job with that.
Okay, gotcha. Now, this job, of course, requires a bit of user interaction, a bunch of other things, but I want to ask a little bit more about the technical aspect, and we'll get back to it. So I see you've done some pretty advanced SQL information here. Just throwing it out there. First of all, like, what does SQL stand for?
I believe SQL stands for Structured Query Language, if I have that correct.
And it was created, do you know when it was created and by whom?
I do not know when it was created or by whom.
Okay, what's the difference between like SQL and MySQL?
I mean, I'm not too particular on SQL, if I understand it correctly, SQL represents just the structured query language, or a class of languages that fall under that framework. MySQL being sort of like a specific instance of it, and a database framework associated with it, which is sort of proprietary material. So that's how I see that distinction.
Excellent. And let's just, can you explain to me why you would want to use a full outer join in SQL, and sort of why you would use it and what it is?
Full outer join. Joins are a pretty gnarly subject. I am still learning the finer details. I suppose the key thing about an outer join is that you're capturing all the data from both the tables that you're attempting to merge. And I can see some advantages there if you're trying to highlight gaps in what's missing, because it will include like the null references. So you get to see on both sides, like, okay, what is in this table but not in this one, and vice versa. And that can be useful versus sort of like an inner join where that information is excluded.
Okay, excellent. One second. Okay, so I see, would you say that your primary language is in C#?
Yeah, so the primary software language right now is C#.
Okay. Just a couple of C# questions. Why would when would I use the using statement in C# and what does it do?
Using typically, give me 1 second to sort of think the question through. Okay, so generally, using is a statement you want to use when you are trying to access something that you require sort of an open and close method to. I know I'm not using the technical terms exactly, but in case you need to do some sort of access, some sort of I/O, using is a way of ensuring that the connection that you make to the outside is properly closed and goes through the right channels, and you usually can avoid certain hiccups if you try to, I don't know if I said do it in a more ad hoc way, but I guess it's leveraging a feature of the language that provides safe I/O access.
Inside, yeah, the cleanup when that block is completed. Yeah. Yes. So let's see. Can you explain the difference between a byte and an S byte?
A byte and an S byte. That one I'm actually not too certain about. In my experience using C#, I have really yet to encounter the difference.
Gotcha.
But I'm sure it's something, that can always be reviewed before
Gotcha.
use.
So you don't know what the S stands for in S byte?
That I'm not certain of, no.
Okay. Can you explain the difference between an is and an as operator in C#?
Is versus as. I know is relates, I suppose, sort of directly to identity. As is something that I'm a lot less familiar with.
Okay.
Yeah, because I guess in my time with the language, and especially my time with my project using C#, the details of the language, or I guess my focus hasn't been getting deep into the nitty-gritties of the C# language. It's a desktop application, and most of the concepts have been pretty, I don't know, the semantics that I've had to use have been pretty straightforward.
Gotcha.
A lot of my focus has actually been on the more DevOps side, because that was sort of where the business needed some critical assistance. So I came into sort of a large C# code base. The code base was pretty stable, but the supporting architecture around it was a little bit flawed. So while I've been brushing up on my C# knowledge, and I've made some forays there, really for the benefit of the business, my core focus has been on other aspects.
Okay. Well, then let's take a step back from specific of C#. And if I had are you familiar with the classic Secret Santa, where you have everybody puts their name inside of a hat. They walk around, and what happens is everybody pulls a name out of the hat to see who they're giving a gift to. If I were to code that as an application or a website, can you walk me through how you would create that algorithm, sort of like exactly as we want everybody to go ahead and get someone out of a hat so that they're associated, non-specific to any programming language, but just algorithmically, what's the plan there for how you would construct such an application so that we could find out, and each person could find out who they're giving a gift to?
Okay. I guess before I dive into the answer, I just want to ask a few framing questions.
Sure.
Are we specifically talking about the business logic, or are we talking about the full stack from the UI going all the way back?
I'm going to leave it as open as you want. so that way you can specify as deeply as you would.
Okay. Open-ended makes it a little more challenging, but that's fine. The first thing my mind goes to is, okay, we're capturing, let's say we're capturing the input. I guess that's not, we can leave that detail, but at some point we have a container object and it has a list of these names, or some sort of container containing the names we want to pull out. I think the key part of this is that we need to ensure that somebody cannot receive their own name.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in my experience working in functional languages, I tend to see these things as like a series of operations. So you have an initial collection of names. You might create a second collection of names, and you can iterate through the first one. First name comes up. Using a rand function, you can choose a name from the second one, excluding the first name that you've had to do the matching pair. Or I suppose you would filter first for that one and then do the rand function. When you find the associated name, you pop it from the container and you can keep iterating. And some function of that type of iterative process, I think, will be able to get you through. And at the end, you should have another sequence of name pairs, and you know for sure that the names are not matching, and then that can be output out, and that should give you something you can work with.
So you have, to understand, you have a list, and then you're taking the first name on the list, and then you're going to make sure that that doesn't fit that first name, and then you're going to the next name in the list, and then making sure that doesn't fit, and you're popping them out of the list, and then you're making sure that that's not that person's name as well, and you're doing that throughout the entire list of people.
Yeah, so you'd have to have sort of a duplicate lists. The first one is the one you're going to be iterating through. The second one is the one you're going to be pulling the Secret Santa name through. The second one is the one every time you find a name to pull from Secret Santa, you pop it out, so that one gets smaller and smaller. And the first one you're iterating through. So it's going to be first name, maybe out of 6 options, get 1, then 5, then 4, and you work your way down. The important step just being that you make sure you always filter the first one to remove the name you're trying to pair with.
Okay. In that situation, let's say you get to the final person in the list, and the only person left in the list is that person. So then if you filter that person out, they'll be matching against a 0 set, correct?
If I understand, well, the algorithm in my head, that scenario, I mean, we'd obviously have to do testing to make sure, but that scenario should be avoided, because at the point where you're down to 2 people, it's difficult to explain without having paper and a whiteboard, which is usually how I like to go through technical questions in a way that I can lay everything out. But the algorithm as it works in my head, you should not be able to end up with a person matching their own name at the end, because that means that there was also a match somewhere at the beginning for somebody else in the same. Do you understand what I mean? Like the only way for that person to be left is if everybody else got matched, but that means somebody else will also have been matched with their name. So like that should not ever happen. But again, without the ability to sort of draw that out and have a working structure, it's difficult to find a way to communicate that.
Okay. All right. And then final question, just checking. When you're talking about leading our clients and communicating with them, do you have any particular training in leading? Anything where you've or any step of leading clients and instructing them on new UI and UI needs, or explaining the products to them?
Yes, I actually do. Quite a bit of my previous experience involves doing that sort of training. especially while I was at university. I had the opportunity to work in a engineering lab for several years. And a big portion of my time was when new people came onto the project, walking them through the entire setup, walking them through the UI of all the software we had to use for our systems and for our experiments. Once I had my previous work before this, where I was an intern, when new interns came on, it was also my role to get them started on, well, basically every single aspect of the system. It was
good. Nice.
Getting them, I actually spent a lot of time in that role, basically splitting my time between writing software and spending time training the interns. So it was a lot of conversations about, instead of making sort of some bulk work plan that everyone could follow and be miserable, well, how do we utilize these people effectively? Because they're all young and smart, but everybody has a different schedule and everyone has different goals, undergraduates, masters, PhD students. So it's a lot of time doing one-on-ones, working out, okay, what would you like to do? What do we have access to? And how can we find a healthy medium that does valuable work for the organization, but also provides validation for you as a person working on it? And at times we use them to test the software that we were releasing to clients. So they also had to play the role of a client, and we had to figure out, okay, what is working for you here? What are the gaps you see in this UI? And people are not always great at communicating why they don't like something, why they like something. So a lot of like learning how to effectively communicate so someone can be free in explaining, hey, this is what I'm drawn to, this is what I'm not drawn to. This was actually a pain point for me. This was not a pain point for me. So a lot of experience there, I think.
Okay. Excellent. Awesome. Well, I tell you what, we're going to take all this. I'm going to talk to my team. We'll come back and we'll let you know.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much.
You too.
Oh, dear God. Thank God that's over. Jesus.
You're not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say that.
I know. It hurt to be this person.
Yeah.
I could see the pain on your face, Gant.
Dude, I am not okay. I hate the worst interview I ever had was with one of these ever. And so that's why, yeah.
When you did the
Would you like to reveal
like,
your type of interviewer?
I can take a
you
guess.
Ready? You good guess.
Well, go ahead.
You are the interviewer who likes asking weirdly detailed niche technical questions over a phone interview.
Yes.
And no one likes that person. And it's
no one likes this person. No one likes this person. Oh my goodness. I applaud you on so much that you did there.
I tried my best. I mean, I was at a certain point I realized like, okay, this is the type of interviewer he's going to be. And I had to think, I'm like, okay, because there's the first urge in an interview, I was trying to do is like, okay, this is a real interview. You want to try your best to answer the questions they give you. But also at a certain point, it feels like it has to be fair to say, that is not something that I know right now.
I wish you had said that.
I tried to frame that for some of the questions. Like, that is not something I know. Right. I tried to spin it like, that is not my focus on, like, I'm not trying to learn everything.
Kudos to you, man. Like, I was like, I mean, so I didn't ask you if you had any questions for me. Generally, I find that sometimes this interviewer is not personalized, might be a little bit on the spectrum. I tried not to smile or nod. That was really hard for me. I tried not to give you any kind of visual, verbal cues. That was really hard. Yeah, and then I absolutely asked you questions that you could have gotten an answer in Google. You could have Googled it and in a second gotten an answer. I'll personally say that part of me was wishing that you just told me to go F myself.
You see, the thing about that is that would make this whole thing much, much shorter.
Yeah. I imagine that. So you took, and so some of the things I'll acknowledge here. All these questions were gotcha. Go look it up. no one should have these things memorized unless they recently needed it or had to have it in some place. Even my final question was a gotcha. All of them were gotchas. They were all to nitpick and go into it. They were just disgusting to figure out and write. And so what happens is, like, you would answer to the best of your ability or say you don't know it, and then you bring it back to a strength, which I really, really appreciated. The only thing that I wish that I could have figured out that you could have done is taken control back, because you let me throw punches. I threw so many punches. I have more punches. These are all just written up. I mean, who invented SQL in what year? I mean,
that one, I just
should have punched me right in the face, man. Should have punched me right in the face.
And I mean, because this is the thing, and I suppose one of the good things was, like, as soon as you went into interview mode, like I went into interviewee mode.
Yes.
So, it wasn't like, oh, I can say anything, it's Gant. I'm like, okay, this is like for real. So I feel like all of my hesitations were probably accurate to what I would do in the scenario.
Yeah.
So like that question, so like that question one was like, okay, I'm not even gonna, like, I'm not supposed to know this. No, the guy who did it doesn't know when he did it.
I had to look it up just so I could ask you. I didn't know this answer. But yeah, that's a hard one to do, because like what happens is it puts you on your heels, and you're being nice about it in an interview, so you stay on your heels, and then it's not till well afterward that you're kind of like, I wish I just told him like this or that or something like that. And I think that this is probably one of the most painful interviews anybody can get. If you get that person, it's so hard, because you're like you're trying to do a good job with absolutely no help. The person's just high-fiving you while you're drowning.
That's a good way to put. I mean, to go back to what you said about like taking control back, I think normally you're waiting for, I think, an interview, you're waiting for like some kind of like positive response, and you're like, okay, and now I'm gonna, but like you just, okay, cool, thanks, and then all right.
Do you have any questions for me? Is like a common one. Completely skipped.
And that's when
completely skipped. I'm not gonna ask you anything, and it's really hard. Oh my goodness. Yeah, dude. I applaud you on honestly, you smiled through the whole thing. You brought it back to your strengths. You kind of like dealt with these really tricky questions pretty well. I don't know what else you could have done on that one, but I can tell you specifically, if you had just beat me up or said like, you know what, give me 2 seconds on Google. Oh, this is the difference. I probably would have just broke character and applauded or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, we all love to say, that's what we do in interviews, right?
Right.
Like, oh, they ask me ridiculous thing, I'm just gonna, but like the truth is, like, you want the job, like it's like, okay, this person, there's like this quote from Trinidad, like, silly people are a test that God has sent for me to pass. You know what I mean? Like, I just need to make it through this person. And then, this could be fine. I was kind of waiting for the do you have any questions for me part. And I don't think, I think someone in the chat was saying like asking the S-Bite question back. But I think it would have been more like, now knowing that you are this type of, like, I would have sort of like, okay, so these questions you've asked me, is this something that you frequently encounter in your code base? Do you spend a lot of time dealing with the byte versus S-Bite issue?
Spin it on its head.
Or has been a thing that you have come up across, et cetera, et cetera. I'm asking because I want to make sure that I have the relevant skills to be a part of this team.
Yes.
Just like a.
But I kept you on your heels is the trick. Like every time you were starting to kind of climb back out, you were bringing it back to a strength. I asked you another stupid gotcha question, and it's just like it's hard. It's hard when you have some person there and they think they know everything. So, truth be told, my worst interview ever was against one of these people, and I to this day wish that I'd said so much that I didn't say. So That's
what Twitter is for, though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I brought up at a certain point, like, it would be great if I had like a whiteboard and we had some way of actually working through this like we would do in actuality versus trying to do it over the phone.
Everything I asked was not real, basically.
You know? There was also the question of like, well, what does have anything to do with my competency as a developer? It probably does not. Like, does Byte versus S-Byte? It probably does not. But again, like, I mean, I think this is good because like this is someone that exists in the wild for sure. And you have to know at least how to recognize them, because at least about 5 minutes in when I realized, okay, this is the type of interviewer he's going to be, I could sort of reframe like, okay, they're going to be asking me silly questions and we need to sort of quickly go, can we answer this? Can we not answer this? Like, is this okay? Is this not okay? And try and sort of like navigate the waters and see where that would go.
And is and as, like, I tied them together like they're logically combined, like they're almost like antonyms of one another. They just sound close. They're not even like related to so you started processing. So I kind of like I saw you were like processing, and you actually like tried to figure out, why are these next to each other? There was no good reason why they were next to each other. It was a trap. They were all terrible gotchas.
Traumatized.
I'm so sorry.
I think you both did an excellent job. This was really fun to watch, and I loved, like, Gant, when you started coming very early in this conversation. I can't remember what that first question was. It was like, oh, you know.
I know. I cringed inside. I'm gonna need to go curl up in a ball and recover after being this person. I feel icky.
Also, it's really funny because like out of all the stuff I put on the resume, I feel like you actually just unconsciously picked like the weakest things. I'm like, why doesn't he ask me about Python? Like, I wrote nothing but Python for 4 years. Ask me anything about Python, I can tell you every keyword in it.
I actually steered clear of things that that because the Nitpicker is going to absolutely go in a place where they can, whether they know it or not, they're going to be in a place where they can really feel superior. So I stayed away from your F sharp, because if you go too deep into functional, you'll lose me, and then I lose my control of this meeting. Now the trick is, I don't know if you could have asked a question to get me on my heels, but that would have been interesting. But I made sure I was prepped to keep you on yours.
Yeah,
because that's what they'll do. They want to control it.
I like that you just said that, and we've got some questions and comments in the chat, but I know one of them was, what's the goal when you're dealing with a nitpicker type of person? And I like that you said that try and get them on their heels. Maybe if you can throw them off a little bit, then that'll give you an opportunity to have the level playing field. But what else do you think?
I can tell you specifically, you want to find out if that person actually has any real say, and whether or not they're actually a gatekeeper. Some places are hiring so big, they just assign a bunch of devs to a bunch of different resumes. And it's like in college where you got one professor who's going to get through chapter 4 by the end of the year, and the other one who's like expecting to finish that entire book. So the truth is, you want to find out whether or not this is the smartest path, whether or not that person is respected internally, whether or not you're definitely going to have another interview or another shot to be around it, because you might want to find out that perhaps, because if you see this job and this is the one person who gets you the second interview, so like asking questions about their process, which I didn't let them do, to find out whether or not you are being blocked early just because you got to the wrong shuffle in a list of resumes is really key. Because if you find out that this person, that you have another one, you can stress less. You can actually probably push back more if you know you're going to have definitely a chat with a management or some other level.
Yeah, I would also add, I don't know if I did a very good job with this, but as to what some of the people saying in chat, like to kind of like stand your ground, like once you know, okay, this person's going to be a nitpicker, let's say you don't want to just tell them F off and just leave, right? So, okay, so like your game plan is, don't let them pull you into this nonsense question sinkhole. So whenever you get one, and you're, okay, that is not relevant. Like a nice way of saying, well, that's not really something that I'm focused on. What I am focused on is, and like Gant said, bringing it back to your strengths. So whenever they try and like pull you into the abyss of like the docs no one reads, you get it right back into. So at the end of the day, you know, like, because I think at the end of the day, regardless, like the confidence is important, you know, and maybe this person, they might hate you at the end or not, but like at least, okay, they were respectful, they were confident, they didn't answer my nitpicky things, but they don't seem like, you know, they look like they know what they're talking about, and that might work. So, but at least at the end of it, you know, I did the best that I could do on this interview. Yeah. This person was not a good interviewer, but that is, I can move from there. And there might be, you know, there might be somebody else listening in. It might be you never know. So like someone more reasonable might have access to what you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
I know Karen had a couple of comments in here, and she said, the nitpicker is not having a conversation or getting to know a character of the interviewees for fit. And I thought that was interesting. They're focused kind of on that nitpicking, and I'm not sure that nitpickers know that they're nitpickers, or that's just the type of person they are. And Chad had asked, like, do you try to win them over? And I don't know, can you win over a nitpicker even?
I think that you know, one of the things that we had here was reframing, an effort to reframe. And I think that that's the only thing, because if someone came in and answered all their questions correctly and solved their puzzle, I think they would be sad. I think you still lose. I think the person who wins is the person who makes the nitpicker feel like they, you know, like helps them. I don't know. I think like basically puts them on their butt. I think you might have to, and that's the worst thing, because like you're trying to be nice. So we can say it in this all we want, but it's kind of hard. I think I saw that a little bit. I'll say that Brian, when he was working against the jerk, he was willing to laugh and acknowledge the impossible question a little bit, and that sort of helped the reframing. And I think that that's kind of like what we were seeing here, is that we're trying to reframe it. And I think that that's probably the best way to win. The only way to win is not to play.
Right. Yeah. Like, because at a certain point, I was just like, okay, some of these questions, I don't know the answer. If I try and like squeeze out an ad, like that's not going to endear you to me, right? Because I'm probably still going to be like, you know, like it's probably better just be like, that is not something that I know. But here's what I do know. And I mean, I don't know, because I think someone was asking, like, you don't want the interview to be threatened, which is true. But there's only so much control you have over that. Mm-hmm. If this is a person who is just 100% going to be threatened if you don't play the game with them, then, you know. But I understand what she's saying. Like, if you sort of get too reactionary with it, then that also might backfire. But I think we even talked like respectful ways to be like, that's not a question that I can solve right now, or that's not something I'm focused on right now, or that's not something I've had to deal with before. But here is where, you know, my interests and talents lie, and kind of bringing that into scope.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We had the question in there, if you felt compelled to answer no matter what. And I think that strategy that you're talking about allows you to answer it, but to also reframe it in a way that is positive for you as a candidate.
Yeah. So like, I guess when he asked me, I think somewhere to the C# part, it's like, okay, well, I don't know that part of C#. You know, here's where my focus has been. And I talked a little bit about other stuff, but I could have, you know, sort of spun into like, well, I have been focusing on GUIs. You know, I've been focusing on event-driven programming. I've been focusing on, you know, like proper, you know, callbacks or whatever, like something where it's like, okay, these are the parts of the language that I know and that I am good at. These other parts that you're talking about, I have yet to encounter them, you know, that could happen in the future, but that is not where I've been at the time.
Yeah. Every time you brought it back to your strength, the strategy was to bring it right back out again, which sucks. And it leaves me with all the control and you with none in the presentation. So you would hit it and then you just slowly start bringing it back to something. And then you notice at the end, the question played straight into your strengths. So as soon as I could, I killed it.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
I think,
terrible.
talking about this strategy, someone, Brian in the chat, wrote that his technique would be to put them a little on their butt, give them enough wins that they don't feel upset. And there's this weird balance to strike, right? It's like playing with a toddler almost, right? Like you want to let them win a little bit, but not too much. Like they have to have something that they want to continue to work for or feel comfortable enough that they're not going to quit, right?
It's like ultimately this is an unreasonable, or a person doing an unreasonable action. So it's like, what reasonable action do I take to mitigate this unreasonable action? Go
after the reason. So Kirk, I like the one that you did where you said, can you tell me, so this, is this a significant portion? I'm interested in this job. Can you tell me about why you're getting so deep into bytes versus S bytes? Is this like a performance concern that's actually happening at the company? And now you've thrown it back on me because you came up with that, but you came up with it after a recovery. So, but that would have been a good one. And then that would have kind of pushed me back a lot. Because honestly, I would not have had a backstory ready for that. So I would have been reeling.
I got to Google that. Right. And I think that might also be a good way to get it back into a conversation versus like question, response. Because I feel like almost always the best interviews tend to be, at some point, they steer into a little bit of the conversational aspect. People don't actually like just doing question answer. Most people like giving answers, like even interviewers. Or if you can get them answering, people like that. People like talking about whatever they do.
Yeah, I like that idea of using the questions to kind of diffuse a situation. And Glenn said, if you get a nitpicker to talk about themselves, right, you give them a little bit of like, oh, I'm interested in you, right?
And they start picking their own nits.
Now, here's the thing that I'll say. Once you hate the nitpicker, you actively don't even want them to talk about themselves, and you'll dial out. So one of the questions I had was actually, I don't think I got to ask it, but it was about like, how much room does a C# string take in memory? And I was like, this was an actual question that I got asked, but I was already like down and out when it happened. I was like, do you know? He's like, yeah, actually I do know. Then he started like being really proud of knowing it. And all I could think to myself is like, I bet you would be proud of knowing that, jerk.
See, if I already gotten like a job offer from someone else for like $1 million, I'd be like, well, it's 2020, so I don't have to know. Don't say that.
I think Andrea brings up this really interesting point about the opinions of be respectful versus pushback and how those strategies might differ along gender lines.
Yeah.
Because culturally, men are generally told like you need to, like if you meet a force, like go back against that opposing force. Where that could definitely be a thing.
Well, I interestingly enough, I'll kind of throw out there, I've heard some of the most interesting stories of female interviewing female. And so like that, and maybe you can elaborate on that, where it's strange how I do actively think that people would change the way they interview, even if they're generally one style or another, depending on gender roles by far. Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Weird point. Every technical position I've ever had, I have been interviewed by a woman and my boss has been a woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So
interesting.
I guess I'm not really, it's not like it's at the point where when I had a male manager once and I was very uncomfortable. I don't like you. This is very strange.
You know, for me, I almost going into an interview with a man, I'm am more expecting situations like this where like, okay, I know I've got to be on guard, but the most times I've experienced them have been where I've been interviewed by a woman, right? And they're asking all of these questions, and I've kind of not prepared for that because there's this almost assumed camaraderie of women in tech, or you think that there is, and that's really not the experience that I've had. And so then it's been a little bit more challenging. I felt like I fell back, and I'm like, I'm not really sure how I can regain my ground here because I was not expecting this at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if there isn't a little bit of like sort of like a counter happening. So women in technical roles, there's so much more men in tech. So it's sort of like they feel like it's almost like you have to show that you're more technically competent because people are always challenging you. And that sort of translates into the way you interview. And then maybe on the male side, it's like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it gets to the point where it's like, is the person sort of like doing the regular thing or the thing that people expect? Are they doing the thing that people don't expect because other people expect it? So like would a male interviewer like want to be more empathetic because people think he might not be empathetic? I'm not too sure. But I do agree that whether you're conscious of it or not, as soon as you see the person you're interviewing, you're probably gonna shift around a little. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It might be more difficult for you if you're just the same every time, but it definitely happens. Like as soon as I realized Gant was like, okay, do bro nitpicker man, I had to adjust. Like, all right, he probably gonna go talk about me in a forum in the next 5 minutes, and then I don't know.
I really appreciate how you did that. So just thanks so much, and I hope that no one pulls up this recording and skips straight to the middle, and they're like, "Who's this jerk?"
Gant Laborde, what a jerk!
I will never interview at Infinite Red. That'll be the worst.
It's essentially that's the end of it. They're like, "I don't want to talk there." And the fun thing is, like, I do like the Secret Santa question because it has that built-in time bomb in it if you get there. But I don't ever ask that in the terrible way I was doing it to you. Like it's tricky.
As soon as this is done, I'm gonna go check to see if the thing in my head worked the way I thought it was gonna work.
It doesn't. Just imagine like you have everybody in the list; they're all assigned, and then you add one more person at the end. They would only be able to be assigned to themselves. So you could actually have a successful list all the way up to one point, and then n plus one. You would. Yeah, it was a trap.
Well, I'm just gonna make sure that person is Gant Laborde.
I'm just constantly assigned to myself. It's so sad.
Just scrolling through to see if we have any more questions here.
Oh, that's a good question from Andrea.
A good one. Is it true that wearing a suit to a software engineering interview is like the kiss of death?
I want to say something about that because I did get pushback the last time I went to a software and I was wearing a suit and they were all wearing t-shirts and they're like, I don't know if you fit our culture. But this is kind of weird to say, but I like wearing the suit and tie to an interview. Like that's how I feel comfortable in an interview. I wear nice clothes. I feel more professional. Like we were talking about this before the chat, like I came in, but like that's my comfort. Other people might have something different. And I guess software, this is one of the industries where like you're not forced to be full-bodied suit, but it is something that I like personally, and that's just what I go with. So yeah, I don't think you have to wear a suit. But it's also something that frustrates me. Like if somebody doesn't hire me because I wear a suit, then like they're gonna find something else about me that they're also gonna hate, Like if this is going to offend their delicate sensibilities of living on a cloud and eating bonbons while they code in their head.
I went to an interview once where I think I bought a suit, right? I was fresh out of school and they're like, you have to have a suit with a skirt. I'm like, I don't have a suit with a skirt. So I went and bought it, interviewed for this position, and they're all like jeans and t-shirt people. And they said, you know, when you come back for your second interview, feel free to wear whatever you want. And I thought that that was a really good response because it also opens it up for me to say like, hey, I love wearing this stuff. Like, is it cool if I wear it again, or to not wear that, which I did not want to be wearing. It was like 105 degrees in there because I don't know, it was an old building. But it also allowed me to feel like, okay, they're flexible with what the culture looks like, right? They're not gonna write me off because I'm not wearing a t-shirt and jeans, and they're gonna be okay that I came in here like this, and we'll have a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to, I think going off what Kate said, I think it depends on who you are, on shocks of people showing up. There's a limit, like, even if the company's casual, like there is still a limit. And I think the rule of being equal to your interviewer or slightly more overdressed, I think still applies. Like I'm just not comfortable with being underdressed in my interviewer. Like if Gant's wearing a t-shirt, I guess I would just have to have no shirt. I just have to be, you know. But you know what I mean? Like I think you gotta have balance, you know? So while I would wear this to a software engineer, I would not wear like a full 3-piece suit maybe. I might not borrow Brian's tux.
Yeah, the truth is, what side do you want to err on? And I think like you're either going to, no one's going to care, and then there's going to be a person who cares. And what side are you going to err on? And it's an interview. You're going to interview on the correct side.
Right.
You know?
I think a slight dress up shows that, you know, like I'm taking this seriously. Right. I don't want you to think that I just like woke up 5 minutes ago, Skype on, let's do this, you know?
And I care a lot about people's presentation. So I'll say that it wasn't me interviewing you today, but you dressed up, you wore headphones, your audio sounds good, your background's pretty clear. When I kind of talk to people about how they virtually interview, I care a lot about your virtual presence. And I think that it's important. I think that, you did a great job with that part, even though the nitpicker probably would have left it because it was strong.
Well, I don't care what he thinks.
Agreed.
Well, I will also say too, you could probably do a little research and maybe reach out to the company, somebody in the company, and see, you know, what do you generally wear on a day-to-day basis? Or even ask, like, you know, is there a dress code for this interview? I've had interviewers also say like, hey, this is laid back, you know, wear whatever you want. Don't feel you need to get dressed up. So I think that there's a little bit of research to informing your opinion that you can do as well. That could be helpful. But definitely like what Gant said about having your online presence and being clear, and that's all really important. Someone had asked earlier with Zoom calls and video phone calls, whether or not you could look something up, like if you could Google something. I thought that was interesting. I almost always have a second screen up when I'm doing an interview with all of my notes that I have, just because I'm afraid I'm going to forget something or miss something. But what do you all think about Googling while doing a call?
I'm not sure. I mean, because my first thing is like, okay, if I'm asked a question and the interviewer can clearly see that I'm sort of like typing up the answer, that I don't know how I feel. I mean, you know, okay, let's say I reverse the role. If I'm the interviewer and I ask a question, I'm sort of expecting a response from the person, like from them. Mind you, the whole like would not be asking the type of gotchas that they would feel the need to Google in the first place. So I don't know, maybe that's it. It's like the questions that you're hoping to get or you should be getting you should not be having to use Google to figure them out.
I think it's good if you frame it as you've got the bookends of it. So as sort of like, if you're going to get the details, that's fair. So if someone says, okay, well, I'm going to can you explain when I click this link, like what's happening? And it's like, okay, well, there's, academically, I could talk about this. There's this part, and then say, there's a 7-layer OSI model of networks. Like, is that what you want to get into? And because I'll Google, you can Google it up and be like, aha, it'll go this, 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 and this. And then you knew what you were going to say, but you just didn't have like a list memorized or something like that. Totally okay. If you said, oh yeah, I would do it this way, and that's called something. That's called some kind of graph. Give me a second. That's called the Huffman graph or whatever, something like that. And you're like, oh, okay. The fact that you can quickly retrieve information is a great interview tactic. If I could just go click, 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 the answer is this. If it's something that you don't expect me to have, but then I kind of add into what I'm doing, it's kind of a bonus to me.
Yeah. The thing is, I guess I have much less experience with these types of virtual, interviews over like Zoom and Skype and these types of things. But going forward, this will probably be the way the majority of interviews are done. So it's good to get started now with the practice. Also, the first thing I just think was just like technical, making sure like you said, like making sure everything's okay technically. Mm-hmm. Just like taking the time before, make sure your lighting's okay, the sound is, well, sometimes people can't really control sound, but at least like lighting, quiet space, et cetera. Testing your audio and video before everything gets started. Zoom's actually really good for that. It does give you a chance to make sure that like you're all cool. Little things.
Very agreed.
How do you feel about the I don't know answer? I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah. If somebody were to respond in that way.
I love it. I think that it's absolutely fair. It depends on the question. So for instance, the specifics of that stuff, saying I don't know, is fine. And then honestly, depends on if you're trying to put me on my ass. If you go, that sounds like that's 5 seconds on Google. Let's say it was. Then good kudos to you. I think that Kirk, you did the I don't know, and then you brought it back to what you do know. So there was never an answer of just sort of like, I don't know, game over. It was everything ended with a yes. Everything ended, like you always brought it back. And that's what I had to actively kind of, to put you in a difficult spot. You were gaining, you would get off your heels, and then I had to put you back. And it kept going like that because you naturally moved towards your yes. And so I think it was great because if you didn't know something, you turned it into a positive, which is super, super good. It's just that I think we were like negotiating in bad faith because I think the nitpicker doesn't care.
I like that phrase a lot, like negotiate towards your yes or like move towards your yes. And I guess in every interview, like whenever you have to, like in the interview, you should be getting it towards like, these are the reasons why you should hire me. This is what I'm good at. This is why I'm amazing, and there's probably a way to spin almost anything in that direction.
Yeah.
Even if it's, one of the things I'm clear about is that, when I don't know something, I immediately find the answer versus, and even, you can turn like you're not knowing something into a strength.
Yeah.
I'm never going to learn what an S-bite is now, just out of spite.
Screw you, S-bite! I think we should all tweet at you different S-byte values.
No, please don't.
And terrible 1970s IBM trivia, if you don't mind.
I will block every single one.
All right. I want to thank you both so much for doing this. I think this was wonderful. Before we go, are there any last comments, projects you want to plug, or let us know how we can find you online?
I'm at TK Shillings on Twitter. I'm in the Slack. I spend too much time in the Slack. And if anybody's interested in open source, I've been a little quiet on that front lately, but I'm hoping to have things pick back up. So we should be doing a lot of cool things in that channel on Slack. You should totally hop on there and say hi.
Sweet. Yeah, definitely join our Slack and find TK on there. Gant?
Yep. And yeah, Gant Laborde on Twitter and gantlaborde.com. I speak at all kinds of different events, and I love the Slack, and I love seeing friendly faces, especially when I go to virtual conferences and such. So if you see them doing something that looks interesting and you want to come hang out, I would love that. This is a great community, and thanks so much for having this series, which I think will help a lot of people with these difficult interviews. And thanks so much for having Virtual Coffee all together.
Thanks so much. If you want to join us, you can find us on virtualcoffee.io. You can sign up for our events and see what else we have going on there.